So, what I first wanted to do was show you guys some updates about what's going on in Myanmar. So, these protests that have been going on in Myanmar are absolutely wild. And when I say that, I mean it. Because they are much bigger than I expected. When you think about the fact that the vast majority of people who are currently alive in Myanmar can remember the military junta from 10 years ago, well, now 11 years, it is surprising that knowing the consequences of protests could be death, could be torture, could be slaughter. The fact of how large these protests are baffling. That's on top of the fact that the military government are trying their best to cut the internet, block social media, do everything to stop them from organizing, and they're going from word of mouth texting, trying to make workarounds, use VPNs. They're going the full 360 degrees, doing triple flips to protest. But I guess when you really think about it, it shouldn't be too surprising. It shouldn't be too surprising whatsoever when you consider the fact that the military government, by default, gets 25% of the seats in the legislature. But in the election, Suu Kyi's party, the National League for Democracy, won over 80% of the vote. With no evidence of fraud, nothing, just a straight up victory. So it shouldn't be surprising when over 80% of the country supports you that there are these protests. I guess me, just thinking about the fear that the military junta could cause, I didn't fully appreciate how far the people of Myanmar were going to go in order to protect democracy. So, let's watch some updates from CNN, and I'm going to talk about all the stuff that's been going on since we last talked about it. Which the main thing we should be talking about is the massive protests currently going on in Myanmar.
Shouts of defiance as protesters fill the streets of Myanmar for the fifth straight day. The military, which seized power in a coup last week, is cracking down by resisting gatherings in major towns and cities. And yet, thousands still show up, demanding democracy be restored. Tensions have eased slightly from Tuesday's demonstrations when police shot water cannons into the crowds and then fired guns in the air. A source tells CNN that one woman, though, is in critical condition with a bullet wound to the head. Myanmar state media reports that 4 police officers were also injured during...
We're going to talk about that woman. And the CNN reporter isn't going far enough. The doctor said that it was a live bullet. She was shot in the head with a live bullet, and it was a fatal gunshot wound. They are just waiting for her to pass. That is all they can do. Really. She was shot in the head with a live bullet, and they say the injury was fatal.
During the protests.
I have seen the footage of the shooting. I recommend most people don't go watch it. She's in the front. She is unarmed. She is doing nothing. She isn't throwing anything. She's just standing there. And then you hear a boom, and then she goes limp. She's just shot in the head with completely cold-blooded. She didn't like do any aggressive action. Nothing warranted her getting executed in that manner.
Disobedience is growing across Myanmar, and protesters say it will continue until the government they voted for is back in power. Channel 4's Jonathan Miller with this report.
With 3 fingers to dictatorship, Burmese defied their unwanted ruler's edict banning protests. In cities throughout Myanmar, Generation Z.
So, I can tell you right now that certain cities who have allied themselves with the government have started shutting down protests. And what they do is they make it illegal to have gatherings over 5 people. And so if you're trying to organize protests against a military coup, you can't do that in groups of 4. So, but of course, people have rejected these rules and have done it anyway. There have been certain local governments that have paired themselves closer to the protesters, but many local governments have tried to ban gatherings to no avail, I will point out.
said no, demanding restoration of their elected government. The connected Facebook generation, rejecting the aging general's retreat into an isolationist abyss.
Mother Sue once said, "The youth are the only weapon who can lead the country. Only when young people are good will they become good leaders." I came here because of that proverb.
Water cannon deployed today. Images conjuring the ties that bind Yangon.
I mean, she said a lot of great things. She did a lot of great things for democracy. It's just so hard to balance what she did for democracy in Myanmar, what she did in the protest movement for Myanmar, what she did when it comes to inspiring the people of Myanmar and keeps winning these elections with her complicity in the Rohingya genocide. It's so hard to balance that. So hard.
Gone to Bangkok and Hong Kong. They marched in tens of thousands in Naypyidaw, in Mandalay, Bago. The military's weekend
these things
shutdown.
Look, remember, okay, so when we're seeing these
Mandalay,
protests,
Bago.
look at all these people. This happened while the internet was being shut down, while the internet was cut out, while they were shutting down social media, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. While they were threatening live ammunition being shot, and they were shooting people in the head, killing them, executing them. While that was all going on top of the fact that local governments were trying to ban protests and public gatherings of more than 5 people, and this, by word of mouth, texting, and just making maneuvers around what's going on online with the internet shutdowns, they've maneuvered around it to still have protests of this size. Imagine how big they would be if they had no restriction and they were just playing it completely fair.
The military's weekend shutdown of the internet failed to quell the outrage. Day 4 of protest, and everyone on high alert. And with each dawn, the fear of brutal crackdown grows. Thinzar Shunlei Yi is a young activist in Yangon. Born into an army family, she's infuriated by the military's repressive record, citing its ruthlessness with the Rohingya. She knows the risks of speaking out. How had she felt when she woke to learn there'd been a coup?
I felt broken. Like I feel like all my energy that I have all drained out, and I couldn't read, I couldn't talk. Like it was such a speechless moment for me, because that's the worst thing that we can imagine. Because if that happened, it's really hard, really hard to get back on track. I think many people feel the same. It's like everything we built in the past 10 years all just broken. The coup is not a new thing. The coup is, many countries also experience different types, especially in Thailand, for example, also in Hong Kong. Young people like us, they were striving their best, so they inspire us. We're clearly convinced we are facing the most brutal military in the world. So I think many of us are already aware.
Do you really think the Myanmar military will back down?
Well, we think they won't. In the end, they won't have any other option but just reverse the coup.
If you want my honest opinion, even though this is hopeful, I mean, I guess the odds are in the military's favor. China blocked a UN resolution to condemn what happened. They have all the strength, they have the guns, they have the power. They historically have been able to do this before, but the sheer size of the protests show, I think, a level of domestic resistance they were not expecting. And they shut down, they did expect domestic resistance. That's why they shut down the internet. That's why they shut down social media. That's why they're doing what they're doing. That's why they arrested activists. That's why they had these phony charges wrote up. But I don't think they expected this of this side. So this is extremely hopeful. But again, the odds are still against them. So nobody get ahead of themselves here. And you need to still, with all of your might, with everything you can, support the protests. But again, they're still facing a military that's willing to commit genocide here. So this isn't somebody who's just going, this isn't a group, this isn't an organization that's going to easily let go of power.
And, restore everything. So we're gonna go for it. So that's the goal for us right now.
General Min Aung Hlaing may have overplayed his hand, but he's not a man of compromise. Protesters scoffed at his TV debut yesterday, in which he sought to justify his coup and pledged a true and disciplined democracy would follow a year of emergency rule. But Min Aung Hlaing, a war
The thing is, Myanmar never even had a true democracy. They already had a compromised democracy in favor of the military. The military had veto power over constitutional reform, and they got 25% of the legislature, key cabinet positions. The whole system was rigged in their favor, and they still were losing these elections by 80% of the vote. 80% of the vote. They were just angry that the people didn't support the military-aligned parties, and they kept getting smashed by the National League for Democracy. That's the only real reason this is happening. It wasn't because voter fraud was widespread. There's no evidence of that been prevented to any international organization or even by the military. It wasn't because they had a real fear of democracy like disintegrating. They were scared by how much power they were losing in these elections. They were scared that they kept losing these elections. Democracy started to scare them because the people were getting a taste of it. And when they got that taste of democracy, they looked at the military junta, they looked at the military junta's past and said, "We don't like you. We don't want you." I think part of the reason why these protests are so large, why these protests are so ginormous in comparison to what they have been before, I think it is because the people of Myanmar had a taste of what democracy can be, and they just don't want to let go. They want to preserve the gains they've made. They don't want to withdraw and go back into isolationism on the world stage, which that's what this military government will drag them into. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but Biden has already announced some sanctions. He threatened it before. He's announced sanctions on military leaders. There's companies around the world are cutting ties with the military government's economic hold in the country because there are a lot of companies within Myanmar with deep ties in the military. For example, Japan, just like there's certain Japanese companies that are no longer carry drinks from Myanmar military tied, I think it was soda or alcohol producers.
war crime suspect was schooled in the use of force, and leopards aren't known to change their spots. Today, live shots were fired, most into the air. But while sheltering from water cannon, a young woman in red at bottom left of screen here was shot.
I think are they going to show it? Yeah, well, there's a still frame, but she got shot in the head. So I'm obviously not going to show that to you.
Joining in, but only mass defections from military ranks would really raise the prospect of peaceful resolution to this generational impasse.
And that was Channel 4's Jonathan Miller reporting.
Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, to really emphasize how large these protests are, because I don't want to, I mean, how impactful and throughout the entirety of Myanmar society they are at this point. I want to show you something that hasn't really happened in the United States as of recent, and is very uncommon to happen, and should be very frightening to happen to the military. The military should see this and actually get scared. Look at this footage for a second, and tell me what you see happen. Those are cops running from the police line and joining the protesters and then turning their shields against the other police. That's cops actively breaking the line to join the protesters, to then take their shield and help block the water cannons. That is absolutely amazing. We haven't seen that in the United States. Not in at least not of recent. And not only they're doing it, they're doing it partially so they can use their shields to block the water cannons. And you know what? As amazing as that is, because it is truly amazing, when you win 80% of the vote and then an unpopular institution tries to wipe it away after 10 years, now was going on 11, of a people finally getting a taste of democracy, no wonder people who hardworking people who signed up with a job with the police would look at this, say, no, we voted over 80% for this person. They won by over 80% of the vote. There's no evidence of fraud, no evidence of everything. Some woman, unarmed, just got shot. Screw this. I'm joining the protesters. That is super cool. I respect that immensely. And not to mention, doing that, I just want to emphasize, is not easy. When you jump a police line, the amount of trouble you can get in, not only are you probably going to lose your job, but you can get probably jail. And remember, this is a military dictatorship that's willing to shoot unarmed protesters. Imagine what they consider. They probably consider that you being a traitor to the force. So they are doing this, not only showing their support to the protest movement, not only putting their own bodies in front of the water cannons, putting themselves on the line for the protest movement, but they're putting their entirety of themselves on the line, because who knows how the military junta is going to react to that. And there you can see one of the like captain or the chief, I don't know what the role is, but basically who's somebody who's in charge of the line, walk up to them, and he's now trying to pull them back, get them back in line, because obviously footage of this getting out does not look good. Footage or them just breaking the line, period, does not look good, because if there's not repercussions to it, then everybody else on the line is going to see this like, yo, can we just leave? I don't like beating up my neighbors. Can we just leave the police line? And of course, now the protesters are surrounding them to protect those cops who broke the line, to help protect from the water cannons. He seems to have given up. Here's more people, forces of the government, who have completely dropped it and said, you know what? No, we're not with the military junta. And they're putting the three-finger sign in support of the protesters. They're chanting, they have signs, more people doing this. So this isn't just an isolated incident either. This is happening across society. See, if you look there's monks, which, there's a lot of monks in Myanmar society. That's them also protesting against the government, showing where their allegiances clearly lie. I've seen a lot of people criticizing the protesters, a lot of like gray zone Ben Norton-ish types. I haven't seen Ben Norton comment on it. I haven't actually seen Ben Norton comment on what happened in Myanmar at all. Maybe I should go check. I'm interested to see the gray zone's perspective on a thing like this. Doesn't really, I don't know if it really lines up with the narrative. But a lot of people are looking at, since a lot of the signs are English, saying, see, it's all a CIA op. Because the signs, look at all those signs, they're in English. The explanation behind that's very easy. When already 80% of your society voted for the people who rightfully won the election, and they so clearly, almost unanimously reject what is going on, then your protest signs, it makes sense from a strategic perspective if you already have the vast majority of the domestic audience on your side to make signs that would appeal to an international audience. And that's not to say that they don't have signs in their own language as well, because they do. They're just nitpicking. Very, very beautiful. Very cool. So, well, let's talk about the woman who was shot and how she's fighting for her life. But I'll just tell you right now that the original story I read was that the doctor said she was shot with a live bullet in the head and that it was a fatal wound. That she isn't dead yet, but it is a fatal wound. Yeah, that's not why I think SF involvement, Dylan. Wait, do you think POIU 477, do you think there is like some CIA involvement or something? Good sir? Do you think the CIA was involved in some manner in this? Okay, how? Do you have any evidence? Where's the evidence of this? Do you have any like any documents? Any footage? Any like statements from government officials? Any leaks? Like, yeah, like PR, because you said there's definitely CIA involvement. Okay, then there should be some evidence if there's definitely CIA involvement, right? There's always some? What does that mean? The CIA is literally involved in everything? 1 second. Okay, 1 second. I threw that bottle. I think the CIA did it. What do you mean they're involved in? There's always some. And anything that happens in the international stage. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. No, but you're saying that there was CIA involvement. Where? How? And that's not to say the United States is not getting involved. They very publicly have gotten involved. They're Biden's sanctioning officials who were involved in it. We can point to that. We don't need to pretend the CIA was involved. We should support them through covert ops. No. Yeah, but you said that we are supporting them through covert ops. Where's the like evidence of that? Is there any evidence of us supporting them through covert op? I'm done. I'm just gonna. Okay. Excuse my cough. I mean, it's just like saying that, right? I don't want anybody to get the false impression that we're like the CIA is like involved in some manner when we have zero evidence of this. There are already SF forces from a variety of countries already there. POIU, I got it. Wait. I'm getting a report. PIU. 1 second. Wait, I'm getting a report. This is some pretty high level stuff, guys. Give me a second here. Give me a second. What? Give me a moment here. I'm getting a report. Oh my goodness. What? I'm getting a report. What is this? This is pretty wild. This report I'm getting. Give me a second here. Give me a second. I'm getting it. Holy shit. Yo, wait. Give me a second. POIU. This report, it's got coordinates on CIA operatives. They appear to be fucking your mom. I'm sorry, but whoa, the evidence is stacking. It's building. They appear to be having sex with your parental unit. Let me get more data on this. Yeah, she is 100% taking it from CIA operatives. Wow, man, the data is mounting. That they are completely boning your mother. Holy shit, that's nuts. Wow. How the lengths the CIA will go, man. Absolutely bizarre. Anyway, let's get back to the actual story. And out of wild skepticism, okay? Okay? Wonderful. It must be exhausting talking about foreign policy all the time. Since it brings out some exhausting takes and dumb takes. Yeah, it does. But, you know, it's important, so somebody has to do it, alright? Operation fuck... Operation fucking the ladies. Okay. So, here's the report on the... Here is the report on the woman who was shot. The woman, who was 19, was hurt on Tuesday when police tried to disperse protesters using water cannons, rubber bullets, and live rounds. Okay, so when I said live rounds, that's what the doctors have confirmed is in her skull. Not some rubber bullet, not water cannon, live rounds. The wound was consistent with one from live ammunition, the rights group say. U.S. President Joe Biden says his government will impose sanctions on those responsible for the coup. Biden said the sanctions would focus on military leaders and their family members along with strong business interests. Okay, so let's go down to the report on the woman. On Tuesday, police used water cannons against protesters who refused to retreat. Warning shots were repeatedly fired into the air before rubber bullets were used. Doctors later said it appeared live ammunition had hit protesters. According to BBC Burmese, who spoke to an unnamed medical officer from a hospital, the woman suffered a serious head injury, and another demonstrator had chest injuries. The woman, who turns 20 on Thursday, is now in intensive care. It's heartbreaking. We only have our mother. Our dad is already dead. I'm the eldest of four simply. She's the youngest. I can't comfort mom. We have no words. And this is a little memorial that was put up in the girl's honor. Now, I just want to make clear here. I want to say it one more time. The original reports I read, and this will most likely be the case, was that the wound to her head was fatal. So it seems that it most likely is a matter of time. Sadly. I'm hoping that isn't the case. I'm hoping she pulls through. But the original reports I read was that it was a fatal gunshot wound to the head. So what we have here is we're in a situation where the government is now clearly showing that they are willing to mow down protesters, kill them, shoot them in the head, no matter if they're unarmed, no matter if they're assaulting police, no matter what they're doing. They are willing to shoot live ammunition into the crowds. Okay. I just wanted to make that clear. And so this is the reason why I was not sure how big the protests were going to get. Because when we really talk about this, chat, and I want to get an honest answer from you guys. If you were in Myanmar and you knew and you had memories of the military junta who tortured, who butchered, who shot people, who killed people, they were a military dictatorship, one of the most brutal militaries on the planet, who was active in an ethnic cleansing campaign and had now taken over the government, and they're like, we're willing to use live ammunition. Boom, we just shot this girl in the head, we're willing to use live ammunition. How quick would you really be to jump out there and protest? A lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people have sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, family members. They care about their own lives. That is meant to inspire fear into you. And that's already not even talking about the fact that the government has made it difficult for people to protest in the first place by shutting down the internet, blocking access to social media like Facebook and Twitter, a lot of local governments restricting large gatherings, and of course telling people not to go out and protest, doing everything to stop people from protest, arresting activists. A lot of these protesters have also been detained. So even if you're not shot, you can be threatened with detainment by a military junta. So the risk, the A lot of stuff is on the line here for the people who are protesting. Their life, their freedom, a lot's on the line here. And so the fact that the protests are so massive, despite all of that, that is what's blowing me away. Now let's get to the next story about this. How from Myanmar to Ethiopia, internet shutdowns become the favorite tool of regimes. So, this isn't what only happening in Myanmar. In fact, over 93 internet shutdowns have occurred in over 21 countries just last year alone. So what's going on in Myanmar right now isn't even included in this data. This is just last year. Regimes know that after the Arab Spring and after protest movements around the world, that the internet can be a great tool for them and a great tool against them. They like the internet because they can monitor people. They can check what they believe by posting what they post online. They can, of course, spy on them. They can use it to monitor their people and erase their privacy all the way to their home. They can listen in on people. They can monitor them through cameras, like the camera on my computer. They can check what you're accessing. And that's why things like the VPNs and others are so important around the world. But it's also an amazing tool to be used against a regime. Back in the day, if you wanted to protest against the government, someone had to hand you a flyer, or, which, if that was found, you'd get in a lot of trouble, or you'd have to hear it through word of mouth. Maybe, and this was also risky, you could call somebody and tell them about it. But now, you can text people, which is even outside the reach of what we're talking about right here, but you can also send someone a DM on Twitter. Make a public post on Twitter. You can make a post on Facebook, DM somebody on Facebook, make Facebook groups, make Facebook events. And we're just talking about Facebook, Twitter. And what about YouTube? On YouTube, you can post videos about your testimonies of police brutality. You can post videos talking about an event you're going to go to. You can organize on Facebook. You got comment sections on Facebook. There's a lot that's going on. Hey, thank you so much for the Prime, Episto. There's a lot that can happen with the social media. The internet is an amazing tool for freedom if used correctly. And the people of Myanmar, of course, wanted to use that tool correctly to organize to protect their democracy, which was under threat by military leaders. So, Myanmar and other nations have been blocking Facebook, blocking Twitter, and just straight out cutting out the internet and having internet shutdowns for long periods of time to stop these very protests. Because these types of tools for organizing against regimes and authoritarians are dangerous to them. They're scared of the internet. The internet can be used as a tool of monitoring the people, which then they'll use the internet to their heart's content. They love it. But right when those same tools are turned against them, just to merely communicate with others and organize, to practice their civil rights, their free speech, their human rights, then it's concerning. Because the military government of Myanmar could not win an election fair and square. There's no way. They already rigged the system for them with the 25% automatically in the legislature, veto power, cabinet positions. They get that based on the system that's in place right now. But even with that system, they still lose over 80% of the vote. They see how popular the government is. And so they shut down the internet, arrest activists, shoot activists, block social media sites, do everything possible to stop the protests. And even then, they fail to such an extent, the protests still get massive, even by word of mouth, texting, phone calls, flyers, etc. And then when the internet is let out and people were allowed to post on Facebook, they got even bigger. And it gotten so big that even the cops are joining the protesters. So I have some links to some stories here about exactly how protests in Myanmar and these protesters, when the internet was shut out, like many regimes have done, how they got around it. And I wanted to read that to you guys. With smartphones in hands of more than 25 million people in the country, it has been impossible to stem the flow of information to and from the outside world. The potential is that people can communicate, take eyewitness accounts, and then circulate those quickly via messaging, by social media, on Facebook, and by the internet. So Professor Gagan from the Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information from that technological university. Mobile phones and a boom in telecommunications in the past decade have changed the lives in the country of 52 million and now play an important role in the current political crisis. A few major changes have led to this, expert CNA spoke to said. Myanmar in 2021 is plugged into regional communication and connectivity networks in a way that in the Burma crumbling from a closed economy and isolation under Ne Win's socialist rule in 1988 was not. Adding that back then, messaging and videos had to be smuggled out of the country. Okay, so let's talk about the difference there when we talk about communication and organizing, right? Back then, you had to take a photo, and this happened like during, here's a great example. Tiananmen Square, there's a lot of stories how people hid photos of what was going on in like their toilet bowls and other ways. So government officials who came and raided the hotels of journalists afterwards to make sure they didn't have photos of what happened. They had to actually search the whole room to try to stop photos from getting out. And actually, the photo and video footage of the tank man that is very famous was actually hid in the top of a toilet bowl. True story. So back then, you had to take footage, make sure that footage was not taken from you from government officials, find someone to smuggle it out somewhere, it gets out of the country, then two reporters who then process it and post it outside, right? Where today, I take a photo, boom, it's out there. And this is also in the hand of literally everyone, because back in 1988, not everybody could even afford a camera or had the ties or connections to smuggle photographs out of a country. This is a powerful tool in the hand of an educated populace. Extremely powerful tool. While the country had access to the internet since 2000, it was a luxury few could afford, and SIM cards could reportedly cost $1,000 to $2,000. Still, news and photos of the Saffron Revolution in 2007 were put on websites and blogs, ensuring worldwide coverage. Fast forward to 2021, and prepaid top cards for mobile phones are as cheap and a common commodity. The internet and smartphone boom in 2013, when the state monopoly over phone services ended. As of 2020, Myanmar has 4 telecom operators, more than 140 internet service providers. There were 22 million internet users and 68 mobile connections in Myanmar as of January last year, with an internet penetration rate of more than 40%. Myanmar was a closed system, but the last decade has witnessed a dramatic change. International telecommunications operators saw an opportunity in open shops. This facilitated the widespread availability of mobile phones and the lowering of SIM card costs, which in turn enabled the growth of the internet and social media use in the country. Okay, this right here has made it basically impossible to stop organizing. You can suppress it to an extent. You can cut out the internet. You can block Facebook. You can block Twitter. But then you still have texts. Then you still have maybe possibly VPNs. I mean, but that also, a lot of it depends on the internet's cut out or not. Then you have still, of course, word of mouth. You have the classical routes, word of mouth, pamphlets, stuff like that. You can just call people. And not to mention, back in the day, you could call people, but a lot of that was monitored. But today, literally, you can't monitor everyone calling at the same time. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is that this is an important tool for organizing, protesting, and opposing authoritarian governments. And interconnectedness and globalism ties to the outside world. The globalization of the world, the globalization of communication, is a threat to authoritarians, and that is a great, great thing. Now,
a curd is a curd.
Let's get this to the next story. Hey, Oil Peachy, thank you so much for the tier 1. Now, this, of course, is being recognized by the military junta. And don't think they're going to go down easy. Again, this is a military junta who's willing to butcher, kill, and slaughter its own people. This is a military junta who was in power before, and they want to keep that power. They want to build upon that power. So let's be legit about that for a second. Let's talk about what they're trying to do to counter this movement. A group of the world's biggest internet companies joined Myanmar civil society on Thursday in raising alarm over cyber laws floated by the new junta. I'm happy that they're calling it what it is, at Reuters, saying they would contravene fundamental rights and hurt the economy. The 36 pages outlined the proposed laws were given to mobile operators and telecom license holders for comment on Tuesday, just over a weekend after the army overthrew the elected government of Suu Kyi, the civil society group said. Spokesman for the government and telecommunication ministry did not answer telephone calls seeking comment. Man, you would think for a ministry that's literally called the telecommunication ministry, they'd be more communicative. But I guess not when you're trying to stifle communication and protest. The proposed bill would give unprecedented censorship powers and violate privacy, contravening democratic norms and fundamental rights, said the Asia Internet Coalition, whose members include Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon. This would significantly undermine freedom of expression and represents a regressive step after years of progress. We urge the military leaders to consider the potentially devastating consequences of these proposed laws on Myanmar's people and economy. A copy of the proposed bill, reviewed by Reuters, says it aims including protecting the public and preventing crime and the use of electronic technology to harm the state or its stability. Okay, so listen to this language. This is something similar you'll hear to like what the government, the current ruling government and the People's Republic of China will say, or any authoritarian regime will say. They will come out and say, look, it's not that we hate protest or free speech. It's great. It's just that these hurt the stability of the state. These hurt the public interest. They can help, create crime among the population. This is politician talk. This is them being shifty. And let me explain why. Crime, in this case, is protesting, because if you make declare that they cannot protest, then that is the crime. They're committing a crime by expressing their fundamental rights, free speech. And of course, hurting the state. Hurting the state means their established powers. Them overthrowing the democratically elected government. Now they are trying to institute a military junta. Protesting against it hurts their military junta. So they want to protect the military junta. That's what they're talking about now. Stability. The stability of their established power base. The stability of their new military dictatorship, their junta. That's the stability they're trying to protect. Because with the people protest against the dictatorship, the actual powers there, it do get a little unstable. Oh snap, it seems that over when 80% of the population vote for the other people, and we just reject that, it might get a little unstable because the people might not like that. And only if there was some way to look into it beforehand, if they wouldn't have liked the military controlling the government. Maybe the decades of protest against the military junta, or even better yet, maybe just the results of the election, which showed over 80% did not want you to win with zero evidence of election fraud, which you have alleged to justify your military junta, and then afterwards turned to staple onto it Suu Kyi smuggling walkie-talkies. It says internet providers would have to prevent or remove content deemed to cause hatred. Hatred against who? Whatever this means, this is super vague. Hatred against what? Like, hatred against corruption? Hatred against minorities? Oh no, the military doesn't care about that. They were the one doing the ethnic cleansing, by the way, against the Rohingya Muslims. Destroy unity? Unity around what? A dictatorship? And tranquility. Tranquility in what state? Why would anyone want to be tranquil when you are bringing back a military dictatorship? To be untruthful news or rumors. Oh, like how police are breaking the line and how that's a lie. Oopsie daisy, it seems we have footage of that, but maybe that's deep faked. Who knows? Or to be inappropriate to Myanmar's culture. Inappropriate to Myanmar's culture. Think about how vague that is. Somebody says over here, man, I don't like hot dogs. I'm not a huge fan. Well, that's offensive to me as an American. Hot dogs are a huge staple of American culture. Like, what? What I mean, inappropriate to Myanmar's culture. That is something that's just they're gonna see somebody do something they don't like or say something they don't like. They're gonna look at this list and say, that's vague enough, and staple it to them. That's exactly what they're gonna do. They're gonna say, this person said this leader was bad or stupid, and that's offensive to our culture because we're a culture of respect, and da-da-da, and then boom, you're in prison for like 10 years. That's exactly how it's gonna go. Oh, and pornography. So, Not only are they stifling your protest and your free speech, but they also want to take your nudie mags away, okay? Maybe that was the line too far. We are aware of the draft of the cybersecurity bill and are in the process of reviewing it, said Catherine Strang Lund, a spokesperson for the mobile operator of Telenor. More than 150 of Myanmar's civil society organizations said in a statement, over 150, this isn't one or two orgs, this is like 150 coming together. The so-called bill, they won't even call it a bill, it's the so-called bill. It gets so little respect from the 150 orgs, they won't even give it the dignity of calling it a bill. The so-called bill includes clauses violate human rights, true, including the rights to freedom of expression, 100%, data protection, privacy, and other democratic principles and human rights. Well, the problem with these 150 orgs is they forgot that they just don't care about democratic principles or human rights. Days after seizing power, the military rulers banned Facebook, what a surprise, Twitter, what a surprise, and other social media platforms where its critics have voiced opposition. Can't have that. The junta blocked the internet for a day, but that did not stop giant anti-coup protesters. The Myanmar was one of the world's most isolated countries under military rule from 1962 to 2011, when a quasi-civilian government began liberalization. Of course, it seems to be reversing.